Hey, this is another video for Paul. He asked me a question about what my metaphorical interpretation would be of why Lot would offer up his two daughters to the people of Sodom, the men who wanted to take the men, who wanted to have the men to know the men that had gone inside. Why did Lot offer up his daughters? What is this whole thing? There's a metaphorical interpretation that sounds a lot better than the story being historical. So I don't like the sounds of that story, but it can mean something, and it does. But there's a certain process that I use that I'm very consistent with that I think is a mental process that is the way that the story is encoded, which means that we should all be able to do this. I don't tell people what to do. I show people what I did and what is there. You have to kind of read it on your own. These were meant to be figured out up here. If you can figure out the game, it's not because somebody told you. It's not because you watched somebody or listened to somebody. It's because you went and played it yourself. That's kind of a crazy thing to say right there, but think of it that way. You have to make it work in your own mind. So, my name is Dan Paulson, everybody. Welcome to the video. Now, first of all, he's a Christian, but what we have going on, this connection is incredibly respectful. I'm not a Christian, but I'm using Jesus material as if it is a Buddha or a Lao Tzu-like material, and he's okay with that. So we're having a conversation, and I want to respond to some things. I didn't want to just answer that question. What I realized is I've got something bigger going on. I would like to take in this video, give you a larger overview first, because the answer to that, really that Lot and the two daughters stories, starts when God calls Abram and Sarai and puts them in a land of famine in Canaan. We're going to hook into the story right there, and these are going to be continual elements of us through life. So that's going to be a bizarre thing. People are like, what? Okay, so let me give you an overview of what I'm doing, and let me look at a couple of things that he messaged me on first. Take a look at this. So some of the things that he said here is that he's been teaching it for over 30 years and has made about 80 chapters of the Bible into songs. That's a dedication to it. There's a part here where he says, later I learned that the one I had let slip was the most important. God is to be worshipped in spirit and in truth, as Jesus taught. You call it mind. I don't think that is wrong. We are aiming at the same target. Okay, I want to talk about that just for a second, because yes, he's exactly right. We are. There's a point where I'm looking at the material and I'm trying to make it interactive. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. First verse of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I would look at myself and say, what is spirit? What is poor in spirit? How do I get poor in spirit? How do I get blessed by becoming poor in spirit? I didn't know how to make my spirit poor. What I did know is at some point in going through lots of other material and gathering things up that I was basically living through my life experiences that were, well, resolved and unresolved. You go in and out, you're just drifting unknowingly, colliding with life based on what you're holding up here, thinking it's life out there that is the issue. Rumi, I've been standing on the lip of insanity, knocking, trying to get out. The door opens. I've been knocking from the inside. Yeah, we get to a point where we go, you know what? That's me. I'm living through my bundle of memories, and they're full. That's my spirit right there. If I call that my spirit, suddenly the verse becomes interactive for me. Suddenly I realize that if I'm supposed to forgive this ought against my brother, that means I'm supposed to go find a way to understand that the person who beat me did not mean to do that, that they were not in control. That despite people saying you have free will, there's times things act out of people. I can assure you, and you might have had experiences sometimes yourself, you might look back on and go, something came out of me that at that time I was not in control. Something came out that was just triggered, and as much as I might regret it later and be something different, at that time it was acting out. And that is what made it really, that's what grounded it for me. That's what made it something that I could suddenly look at Jesus material and say, it's like Buddha, to seek emptiness, to find nirvana, that to become poor in spirit is to find the kingdom of God. There's a point where I'm going, I don't know what's there. And I've got another miracle story to tell you. Something is out there. This one happened about 25 years ago, maybe. I had just been laid off from a job and moved out here with my family. And I wanted to, I was in the Midwest and I wanted to leave there and come back out to the Pacific Northwest. So I moved back up where I am now. But then 9/11 happened, World Trade Center stuff happened, the economy changed. Suddenly I came here without a job prospect, good severance package, everything was going to be okay for a while, but suddenly things kind of went south. So I was struggling to do things. I started doing my own developmental work at that time. But during this time, I'm also really searching, looking for answers. And this is what happens. One night, I call it my 747 story. One night, my daughter, she's about 8 years old at the time, yells from her bedroom, "Daddy, what time is it?" There's a digital clock sitting next to me. It's in the evening time. 7:47. It's like 1 or 2 days later, the exact same thing happened at the exact same time. Coincidence. 7:47. Funny. Really? Are you lying, Dad? Nope, same thing. So, but that wasn't the end of it. There were things that kept happening. I was going into town for a job interview, and I noticed as I'm driving along, I've got my cruise control set, but it's like I gradually become aware of this big truck is like going forward and coming back and going forward. And I'm like, I realized, I'm kind of in this person's blind spot. I had my mind somewhere else, and I look up and it's trailer number 747. I go purchase something, $7.47. At some point you're like, wow, that's weird. The project I was working on was an aerial platform for digital photography and agriculture, and I was working with a local company on developing that. Here, it's an old project. I made the 2007 cover of Potato Growers magazine, the new technology issue for, it was going to be big, taking geo-referenced aerial photographs of crop fields and identifying problem areas and knowing where to treat such and such, all that. The intention was to grow it big. So I did that. I developed that, and I kept thinking it was like telling me, you're on course, you're doing the right thing. 747's an airplane, you're doing the right thing. But what happens then? All of a sudden, people are getting electric model airplanes and putting cameras on them and flying them over busy stadiums during football games and everything. And I even got asked the question, can you take your airplane from where you are, fly it over the local stadium, and drop something? Yeah. The technology's off the shelf for that to happen. You could put a GPS on board that's GPS activated. It'll operate something when it's in that range. You just let it go on its own. You can set it to fly automatically. You can make it in your, yeah, I could do that. That's what I'm doing. We're taking pictures, though, of agricultural fields. FAA steps in and said, boom, it's kibosh. Suddenly everything I'm doing is gone. I cannot do this. It's illegal. The plane would have to be certified. There's nothing in place. So this entire project that I was banking everything on is just yanked out from underneath me. But the 747s kept appearing, and I was like, I don't get it. I was frustrated. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, somebody calls me that's working, some kind of a church group working on some kind of an electronic thing. They wanted to fly airplane or like little helicopters at like crash sites to read placards or something like that. They were just curious. They wanted to know somebody that was doing, I had been doing that digital camera downlinking and, flying the camera by VR goggles, getting over all that kind of stuff. So I was already on board. They didn't know the technology. So the guy says, I'm going to sign you on to, I'll send you an email to log on to the site that we have here, or a password to log on, and you can see what we got going on. So he sends me an email, and the password is Luke747. And my middle name is Luke. And I was like, okay, what is that? Where did you get Luke747 from? He said, read your Bible, silly. Okay, here it is. And very quickly, this is the story where Jesus went to go have dinner at one of the Pharisees' house and sat down, and a woman came in and they said, why are you letting this woman do all of this to you? And he's describing, he's teaching a lesson here. It's a big setup to a teaching lesson, with this being in the end, this being what I needed to hear, or what anybody would on a path. Wherefore I say unto you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. Somehow when I read this, remember, I don't believe in God, but somehow as I read this, I took this as an indicator that her sins are my inner self sins that had to be forgiven by becoming the embodiment of love, as opposed to not loving much. I knew I had to get all the things out of me that were not love, and just saying that wasn't enough. Okay, so obviously at that time I was making the transition in the mental hierarchy. I hadn't established yet what God and higher awareness was, but at that time, conscious and inner self, Adam, Eve, I had thought that for a long time. So I was already prepared in reading this to call that myself. But anyway, you look at that and go, all right. It's an anecdotal story. I'm not going to sell that. I don't expect anybody to believe it. It's just something that I go with in life and go, what is happening? I have stuff happen all the time, not to that degree. That one went on for, I don't know how long, 6 months, maybe a year, that kept happening before that guy finally sent me that. It was like I kept seeing the 747 and never knew what to do with it. Never knew what to do with it until later that happens and you're like, how does that happen? Do you know of a John Dominic Crossan? I've got his book, The Power of Fable. Let me say he's widely regarded as the foremost historical Jesus scholar of our time. He's the author of several best-selling books, including The Historical Jesus, a Revolutionary Biography, and The Greatest Prayer. He lives in Mineola, Florida. Anyway, okay, so his idea is that the ancients told us stories in metaphor. They were clever enough to tell us in metaphor, and today we're not smart enough to understand them. And of course, he's unpopular in higher level Christianity because he even teaches that there isn't going to be a return of Jesus, that's a metaphorical thing. Now, I don't know his whole thing, and I don't follow him. I don't teach him or learn from him. What I'm doing is independent. I'm just going after this on my own. But that's exactly what I'm kind of looking at. I'm looking at it in that unpopular small camp, but of other people looking at it going, you know what, there's metaphor there. That's exactly where I'm coming from it. So I look at the Bible then, at some point I'm making transitions and going, I need to interpret some of this stuff. Then you sit back and try to figure out what to interpret and what not to interpret. And at some point in time in my mind, I just go with the idea that if I have to interpret some of it, maybe I'm supposed to interpret every bit of it the same way. And so I just gradually grew into that right there where I just keep saying there's none of this that is historical. It can have historical elements. Things can have really happened. But it doesn't, the city being destroyed doesn't mean it happened in the way that the story holds. It's a destroyed city there that they're using in the element, but it wasn't, marched around by 7 priests 7 times, 7, 7. If you go look there, you'll start seeing the patterns again. You realize that you realize what it is. It's a teaching mythological story as well. It's holding the same patterns that I'm coming up with, that 3-7 grid. It's in Abrahamic material, rock solid. We just have to know how to look for it. At any rate, okay, so the way I approach it is all analytical that way, and with an idea at some point in time that somewhere beyond everywhere else, that somebody knows something that they're putting into all material for all people. And at any point in time, the capacity is there for someone to find their way through this. Wherever you are, you can find your way through this material. And I think that there's reasons to treat the material in a variety of different ways for humanity. I need to treat it the way that I do because it helps me understand what it is. Now, as far as what's happening in Genesis, here's what I want to do. I want to make a comparison. In Hinduism, there's this idea that there is reincarnation, that you die and you're reborn into another body somewhere. You don't remember it, but that each time you come back, you get opportunities to wash things off. I am not at all on board with that idea. That's a Hindu thing only. The population is growing. Where are the extra souls coming from? 14 billion years ago, our universe had not started yet. Where were the souls at that point? But what is really happening in the material is this idea that when you're hurt, you're not going to have to just go forgive one thing. I let it go. You're going to have to begin a process of resolution. This person did this to me and I'm really mad. And I've got that stored electrochemically. And when I think about it, it's an issue. So when I go resolve it so that it's not there anymore, I've just gone through a rebirth right there. And now I get a chance to go through another rebirth and another rebirth and another rebirth and another rebirth until I'm completely pure. So reincarnation is not about outward looking, you're going to have it. Sorry, Hindus. It's about going inward and continually, repeatedly going after all of the things. You don't just say, peace, I set, and let it go. Now, if you're following the religion, you do. But if you really turn inward and say, I've got some issues that I need to deal with, and they're affecting my life, and I really don't like them, but I know that if I focus on them with somebody that's going to be helpful for me, I can resolve those and have my life changed, that I'm going to do that. That is what is in here. And that is what I have gone after. When we get to the Bible, there is no such thing as reincarnation. But what there is in the background. All these stories going along are iterations of you. I'm Abram and Sarai when I start in Canaan. After a process, I become Abraham and Sarah. That's a different iteration of me. Each of these are steps along the way. So when we get down to, in the way that I'm looking at it, so when we get down to, and you know what I'm saying right here, I can only say that from my perspective, is an experiential pathway that I have taken. That going back continuously and looking at things was a necessary component in my life. I had to keep looking at a bunch of different stuff. There were people around me at times that said, God, I'm just sick and tired of it. What the hell? Why don't you just let it go? And you're like, I need to find somebody else to help me. You keep working through healing. I had a lot to do, but at some point it was like I knew what to do. What I would remember is as I go back, as I'm thinking about things, I would think, I want to know what is bothering me. I want to know. And then I would just be driving along, and all of a sudden I've got a memory that's appearing in my head. I have to become aware of it. I remember, I'm little Danny Paulson under the ferns bawling his eyes out. And I go, become Danny Paulson for a minute, and I feel it. And I go, yep, that's the memory right there. It is stored electrochemically. So what I'm going to do right here is build an altar and heal it. I have my higher awareness now. I know today what I didn't know then. This memory was stored under those terms. I just need to update it. So I imagine myself as my higher self reaching down and picking up my young Danny self. Yeah, you can look at it as though you're acknowledging things about yourself that were never acknowledged when they should have been. So those are still in place and they still impact us. And you can tell the way they are by when you approach them and think about them, that they affect you, if you can think about them. But it also seems that if you just want to know what the problem is, that for me, it was just a case, it wouldn't occur to me what the problem was right away. It's almost like that mechanism when you're trying to think of that, that movie. What was the name of that movie? Who's that actor? And you can't remember, but then later you're like, oh yeah, now I remember. It pops into your head. It's almost like that same kind of thing. You're sitting there going, God, yeah, I got a problem. I don't know what it is. I got something from my past. There's something unresolved in there. And then you have to be quiet. You have to get quiet. I would be out taking a hike and just being out by myself. And what I would remember at some point in time, maybe an hour or two later, I would catch myself in a memory that's a childhood memory that I'm like, oh, this is it right here. It's coming to me. And then you go through that and you explore that memory and check your emotional connection with it. And if it's not okay, but you're okay today, but you weren't then, what you're doing there is just kind of acknowledging or updating that memory. You're just letting that memory know everything is okay. By acknowledging it, it eases up. By knowing that it's there and that it's letting you know that it's there. In an energy-based universe, it'll just be that way. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're using our consciousness and our higher awareness to surf the emotions to see what's there. Looking at things and going and resolve them. We become the man of the tombs. You want to resolve all of the things. And for me, it was like, there was never a point in time where I could just go, I'm going to let it go. I let it go. I would think that consciously, with all sincerity. I let it go. I don't ever want to do that again. And then you get triggered again. And you have to go, what the hell? The memory and the perception are not resolved. The seed right there. And to stop the action, you have to go get that seed out. It became that clear. And to me, what they were doing along these stories was taking that pathway. So I felt like as I saw myself on these, that I was those people. I wasn't watching those people. Up in my mind, those were my life. And it's 3,500 years old material that is so foreign to us. It's hard for us to get mentally into their world, into their story. If they could get into our media today, they would be clueless. We're kind of clueless with theirs. There's something deeper in here that is a pathway for the person to heal. And I don't know that that would dismiss the idea of God. Couldn't somebody simply reason that for themselves, if they wanted to, that the true thing is that God isn't looking for your worship, that the God is looking for your actions. The people that follow teachings in an interpretive manner where they put themselves into it and they understand that it's about them, they're going to act and conduct themselves in a certain way. Perhaps God is just looking and saying, who is worthy of finding that? Who's worthy of making it through? Many are called, few are chosen. If you find that way inward, you can believe in me or not, it doesn't matter. What matters is you find that path and you heal. You set your gift down at the altar and you go resolve the ought against your brother. But that these stories get big, doing that. To turn inward, we're looking for some clues, mental. There's some clues in Jesus material that I find hints of in other material as well. You wouldn't know this necessarily unless you look. But here's a way, one of the ways that the material is telling us to turn from outward looking to inward looking. All right, this is something that I believe I've got it interpreted correctly. I find it in Buddhism and Taoism too. What there is kind of a kludge, and when we read it, you'll see it for yourself. You may have already seen it before anyway. This is where Jesus is talking about the bride chamber, the old garment, new wine into old wines. And let me just read this right here. This should sound funny. Then the disciples of John came to him and said, "How come we and the Pharisees fast all the time, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken from them, and then they shall fast. No man putteth a piece of new cloth unto an old garment, for that which is put in to fill it up taketh from the garment, and the rent is made worse. Neither do men put new wine into old bottles, else the bottles break, and the wine runneth out, and the bottles perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved." Okay, so we've got something going on. Those red verses right there, we need to interpret them. There's something that is a teaching in there that we need to gather. But you know what? Right off the bat, that should get your attention is the question was never answered. John's disciples came to him and said, "How come we and the Pharisees fast all the time, but your disciples don't?" And then he goes on and talks about the bride chamber, a garment, old bottles. So right there we've got something that is, it's pointing outward. They're talking about the physical fasting. You know, let's go on and interpret the red verses first, and then we'll go back and see what's going on. We'll have a better idea of what we're looking at here. Okay, so I'm going to read that first verse and tell me that I have to make this mentally interactive for myself, and that anybody reading this needs to do that for themselves. If you're on a path, you have to do that. What is the bride chamber? The bride chamber it's a mental hierarchy that they're using. It is where the conscious and the subconscious reside together. It is said in the material, if you interpret it, that if you are married, that means your inner being and your outer being are in happy concert. You don't sit there and act out. You don't sit there, even if you don't act out, you don't sit there feeling all kinds of turmoil and sense of self-worth that you feel together, that your inner being and your outer being are living in concert. So you're married. And when that's not happening, you're divorced. So let's look at it that way. The children of the bride chamber, these are the things that are the offspring of our life experiences. Can they mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? As long as we are there interacting, let's see, in the days when the bridegroom shall be taken from them, then they shall fast. You know what? This just sounds like when the bridegroom, that would be the consciousness. The bride would be the inner self. So when the consciousness is taken from the memories, then they will cease to grow. Stop worrying about focusing on the stuff. Yeah. Okay, that's it right there. Don't sit there and stew over this stuff. You got to get away from it. Now, as we read these, we become parts of these. We are going to become the garment. We're going to become the wine bottles, okay? So let's read it that way. No man, that means no person at all, no consciousness, puts a new cloth. What is a new cloth? We're trying to cover something. This is a spiritual. We're not trying to put it's not really cloth in the spiritual world, is it? That cloth has to represent something, covering up something. I want to cover myself or put a piece of new life into my old self. For that which is put in to fill it up takes from the garment, and the rent is made worse. Okay, let's leave it at that and go to the next one because it's going to tell us more. But what this is telling us is, you can't just put changes into your old self. It's not going to work. You can't just say, I've had it. I'm done. I'm going to go live a different life. You're going to have to resolve some things, or you're going to bring your life with you. It's going to reappear in your new place, and you're going to wonder why these people are the same as the old people, not knowing what you're bringing. Neither do men put new wine into old bottles. This is us. New wine, old bottles. Old bottle is old self. Wine, that's how we feel. No, people do not put new ways of feeling into their old selves, or else we break. And everything that we're trying to do gets destroyed, and it fails. But we have to put our new life experience into new bottles, into new cells, and both are preserved. You see how these are working? What did he ask? Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? They went from asking from something about the physical world, and Jesus answered everything that, if you interpret it, are all about yourself and are about your inner world. The question right here asked about the physical world, and Jesus answered to the spiritual world. There's your transition. It's hiding. But it should sound like occlusion when you analyze the verse. Then you see what they're doing. So, at the end of the day, I've been working at this for such a long time that it's been such a mystery, and I know that I think it's very hard to see. But I think it's very unique to find minds that understand that there's something more in there conceptually and are willing to do it. But the idea of looking at one's own memories really puts a lot of people off. But that's because the emotions get in the way, and we don't like dealing with the emotions. So we're very quick to just fearfully get away from things and ideas that cause us to go directly experience what we really don't want. And but the people like that don't understand that they're continually carrying that with them. And if they would quit that and go deal with and overcome the fear, knowing that the fear is something that is really, it's a survival mechanism. You feel like you're going to die when you're not. Most people you tell, I got molested, would be like, well, we've talked about it before. People put so much on it, but you can be in a group of people who are not ready to resolve it that would give you a hard time. You have to navigate these waters very carefully. And I have been smacked around for doing a poor job sometimes. But, okay, I wanted to give a very big overview. It's harder. I think that I want to say that that's going on, that I'm working right now on getting ready to show how the Enuma Elish is a creation myth and then a single healing myth, as if we were to read Genesis, the second creation story, then without the lineages all the way up to like a Noah, and then something else that's, I'm not sure what's there. But so it's a very short version of a creation and a rebirth. I don't want to call it a monomyth. It's a rebirth myth. It's for the person that wants to turn inward. Anyway, okay, I wanted to say that. I want to make sure that it's really well known as far as I'm concerned that there's a big scope of things going on. I haven't gotten to analyze that story very completely yet, but when I do get there, I want you to know this is really where I'm coming from. And this is important to say because it is a part of the work. It is looking for what is there in the most objective possible way and looking at it in a way that is not always comfortable for people I know. And you are so polite, and so I see what you've done, and you're so good with me that I really want you to, I want to be fair to you and let you know exactly where I'm coming from. Everyone else, all I can say is what I've got something here is probably pretty unusual to hear and to see. It does take some time, and it really takes the right kind of person. So it's not going to be for very many people. This will never get very big, and it'll never be understood by very many people. I think that has always been the case because it seems to be embedded in the material itself. Okay, so without analysis of the verse right now for you, I will tell you this, that Sodom represents a part of the person on the path that needs to be destroyed. Sodom is also being used to create analogs. I think you've seen that in some of my other videos. So the Sodom story is important, but in the healing process, what we have is there's some new elements that have come in that are going to help us get over this past. Those are the angels or the new men coming in. The sin wants to come, and you're letting off you're somehow appeasing the past. I don't quite get that. I haven't unloaded that one, but it's all a part of our inner self. So he's not really doing it. They've got their mind thinking is not like ours. I really have to try to be a fly on the wall in their world with this one. I haven't moved into it yet. I'm up to a certain point in Genesis. I was working on it, and it just kind of fell off in popularity. I don't think people were following. So I decided to stop that right now and go do the Babylonian one first. Then if we come back to the Genesis one, it's going to be the same process, the way that it works. So anyway, that's kind of where I am right now with it. There is some really thick analogs. They're coming up with things in their culture that we're looking at as if they're coming from our culture and the way that we think about it. We're stuck in modern biases, so it's really hard to not. What they're using as terms are not real, but they mean something to them in some sort of a way that they understand them in the background. For example, if I was going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and I was 12 years old when I moved, had a birthday on the way, and was 13 when I arrived. This fits the criteria in a couple of ways that we could analyze today. Number one, you were 12, and then you moved to 13, so you made that step. That was obvious. But also, if you knew in the background that Los Angeles meant City of Angels, and that Las Vegas meant, Sin City, that's it. That this is like ways of encoding something into the story at a deeper level. So they're doing that with words that we have no idea what they are. So I'm struggling. The word repeats are a boon. Oh my gosh, they are. I found something that I'll be honest, I don't know what it looks like, but I feel like I'm barely cracking this open. Anyway, all right. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about that for now. I do want to cover that better, but I don't want to focus on it right now. But that's the way I'm going to be approaching it when I do. But you know what? I just really wanted to make sure I had this big overview out on the table. I'm going to manage things very respectfully. I know I say things sometimes that I need to quit saying. They can be true, though. I mean, a creationist, as you're trying to understand these fields and why they would have evolved into us, if you deny evolution, you're going to have to come up with some other answer. So, but then you're not going to understand it, I don't think. I think I can interact with and understand it better by what I do. So, I mean, there's a point where we're all on our own, aren't we? I think, at the end of the day, people want their feelings to be left intact. So, I don't know what you do for reconciliation. For somebody else, instead of saying, well, it's the power of God or it's the Holy Spirit, what it is a mechanism that God created in humans to help us get along or something like that. Just classify it somehow differently. But it seems like you could keep your belief intact while still acknowledging that we all can experience the same thing. But that, you have to get out, you have to have those experiences. it's experiential to get there. Okay. I just wanted to say that. I want to be clear about, yeah, it's a very big picture, I think. It's a big story. And the small elements in there, Sodom is us. When our wife looks back and turns to a pillar of salt, this is moving on. When we moved on from Pharaoh, Pharaoh got left behind. Pharaoh represented the past self that didn't, we escaped Pharaoh. Right here, what do we have is that we have Lot. His inner self is left behind. He did leave that behind. And then what? Went into a cave, cross a threshold and into a void. It's meeting the criteria of a repeat going on without even fully analyzing it yet. All right. Take care. See you in the next video.